Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we have from Backxwash Only Dust Remains. So when Backxwash finished her blisteringly visceral trilogy of industrial rap albums, I was genuinely curious where the hell she might take her sound next, especially as she described an increased interest in expanding her melodic backdrops, referencing Björk and Tyler the Creator, stepping into a slightly more accessible hip-hop space, at least compared to the blistering, noisy trap metal she was ripping through. Now, I was very open to this. She's proven to have a killer knack for unconventional hooks, but after His Happiness Will Come First Even Though We Are Suffering in 2022, I was left with the thought that the density of her sound, especially the percussion, it could afford some stronger tunes if she wasn't going to double down on the punishing intensity, which the Titanic debut single for this album, Wake Up, that showed that melody in spades. And really the progression becomes the arc of Only Dust Remains. If the trilogy was living through that dark night of the souls with a glimmer of hope on Mukazi on the end of that last album, this is trying to write from the other side of it. Not just with more melody and a broader sound palette where you could get the bangers like the hook of Ninth Heaven, percussive as hell, blending African percussion with something close to drum and bass, or to something like the whirring beat that morphs into the strings and Michael Go's guitar as History of Violence will hit cinematic swell, but also a thematic expansion, getting to the other side of the trauma, less immediately visceral and crushing, but there's some space now for greater complexity, maybe even the ability to move forward. Now, the initial through line of this complexity, it was laid groundwork on the previous album, but the more emotive storytelling adds greater depth and even some metatext. She's acutely aware that she's seen some success in her art that gives her a little bit of freedom and commercial traction that many of her peers in her community might never have, often by exposing her darkest moments doing so, and that in and of itself can get messy. Undesirable is a really difficult song full of wiry Asian wheedling tones around the strings and walls of synth, challenging expectations of queerness and beauty versus those coming from family, alongside a heavy dose of imposter syndrome. But what really struck me was that line on the final verse about her mother getting emotional at hearing that pain in her art from her daughter. As a writer myself who's told some darker autobiographical stories, that felt viscerally relatable, especially if you found some clarity or catharsis in writing your way out, and some family never grasped how it was for you at that time. And while there are similar trappings in her writing surrounding addiction, drug abuse, depression, the crushing strain of religion, and the seemingly omnipresent weight of colonial or fascist violence, any success or angst now comes with tangible survivor's guilt when Backxwash is acutely aware of, like, the Palestinian genocide in Gaza, or the atrocities across sub-Saharan Africa. What right does she have to feel like this? And at least this strong undercurrent of suicidal ideation, made all the more harrowing by systemic neglect as a black trans woman, or the allies that would pay lip service or push tokenization rather than actually, care or do anything to change things. Her verse on Algiers' Bite Back can't help but resonate there. But you can also tell there's this odd, certain dissociative peace that she's reached having clawed herself back from the breach, set up from the first song, fittingly titled Black Lazarus, as the aching strings, the piano, and the gospel swell pull her out of a slightly rougher mix. How the vocal fidelity changes is actually really masterful. An understanding of its inevitability, but knowing you don't have to go there yet. I like that after the jagged sample chops, revving guitars, and roiling percussion, the crackling gospel second half of Wake Up has her wanting to stay alive because, well, it's small. There's a video game that came out that she really wants to play. I like that mundanity juxtaposed against the biblical weight. And while she's acutely aware of the painful struggle to keep on going in comparison with Merciful Oblivion, as the choirs swell up on the final title track, she's walking away from the worst parts of herself, aware of that possible backslide, but knowing she got out before, and she can do it again. Now, I do have some criticisms. The two instrumental interludes, the album actually winds up feeling a little bit shorter than you might expect, despite this being her longest to date, and some of the poetry can start feeling a little bit familiar in the choices of imagery and symbolism if you're familiar with her catalog. It's still visceral to me, but it leaves the album feeling a bit like a coda to previous projects. And not for nothing, the sonic experimentation on display that pushes towards a slightly more accessible brand of experimental rap kinda had me wishing there might have been a guest verse or two too. I know it wouldn't make sense given the very personal focus and narrative. I understand why she didn't do it. And she does get Chloe Hotline to play Kid Cudi opposite her Kanye, in production only, on Dissociation with the hammering drums and the blaring synths. But I don't know, it might have helped adding a little bit more contrasting perspectives and interplay. I know she could have pulled that off. But again, if I'm nitpicking like this and I'm still asking for more, that's an unmistakable sign of a lot of quality, and Only Dust Remains is absolutely excellent, if not on the cusp of the best of 2025 thus far. I'm not quite sure it's my favorite of hers. 2021's I Like You're Buried in My Rings and My Dresses. It's a crushing behemoth to this day. But if I wanted to get someone interested in Backxwash, this is easily her most approachable album that only shows more potential and populism going forward, set with pulse-pounding crescendos and an emotional vibrancy that only builds more layers. So yeah, pretty much every critic of experimental hip-hop is probably going to recommend this album at some point this year, and I'm going to join the crowd. Definitely one of them. Please, folks, check this out. It's special. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Again, I'm really happy that Backxwash managed to push this out. I've been a big fan of hers for a while. Full disclosure, she did participate in my vinyl video essay from last year. She did participate in an interview, and she really delivered some great content and context that I was really happy to get. So again, I do have a cordial relationship, but nothing that goes beyond that. And again, the music's phenomenal anyway. I'm happy that I could cover it. Please leave your comments down below where you think it fits in with the rest of her catalog. I'm genuinely curious. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved in helping support the channel, get projects on my schedule, yell at me on my Discord, link to YouTube memberships and Patreon is right over there. Don't feel obligated. Really tough times out there. Believe me, I get it. The option's just available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.